In today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500, including the economic calendar. Now, I do post these videos daily, so I highly encourage you to double check the latest video on my channel so that way you get the most up-to-date information. And before I get to the technical analysis portion, I'm going to go over the economic calendar and a little bit of a recap for today's trading day before I get into the economic calendar. We had the PPI inflation numbers come out, which is the producer price index, and the markets moved favorably based off the results. Now, I will say they stated that the indication for inflation seems to show that it's getting cooled off and all that stuff, so on and so forth. But if you look at the core PPI year over year, it is increasing. So it's kind of strange in terms of the media / market. They're showing the favorable outcome, which is the PPI year over year, which is not the core PPI, and that shows a decrease from 2.7 to 2.2. And then even if you look at the core PPI, so month to over month, there is an increase, previously 0.1, expected 0.2, but got 0.3. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because tomorrow's trading day, we have CPI, which is the consumer price index. And the numbers depends. The market seems favorable regardless, and it seems like the Fed most likely will cut interest rates in September regardless. We're just trying to figure out if it's going to be 25 basis points or 50 basis points. But the numbers, in my opinion, are not necessarily that great if you're looking at the core PPI. And if that is the case, then the numbers for CPI are somewhat risky in a way. But at the same time, the way the market has been spinning the inflation narrative regardless is always in a favorable outcome. And even if it's a slight miss, markets tend to move up. So I guess for the most part, if I had to guess, the markets will still move up. MACD lines are showing, which I'm going to show soon in terms of technical side, a little bit of a neutral stance / later on moving up to the upside. Now, MACD lines don't necessarily show are necessarily the actual outcome no matter what, especially since we have data points coming out tomorrow's trading day. So usually I neglect, I don't even bother looking at MACD lines until the data comes out in terms of, for example, inflation numbers or so on and so forth. But either way, so there's that point. And then plus the PPI number itself, without the core PPI, it was 0.2 previously. And then was expecting 0.2 but got 0.1. So there is improvement in some fronts. It's just the fact that the core PPI did not improve. The reason why I'm mentioning that is sometimes, for example, in terms of the Fed stance, they usually tend to look at the core numbers rather than not the core numbers. But yeah, there's that. Either way, so looking at the Wednesday, August 14th, 2024 calendar, at 8:30 a.m. we have consumer price index as well as CPI, which is CPI by the way, and then as well as CPI year over year, and then we have core CPI, and then we have core CPI year over year, all at 8:30 a.m. Mind you, one thing that could play out in terms of important information, because for Thursday we have a jam-packed day, but initial jobless claims, so on and so forth throughout the whole entire day. But I'll keep you guys posted day by day like always. And in terms of the technical analysis portion, again, the MACD lines a little bit later after the fact, maybe the next few trading days / leading up to next week, it's kind of showing to the upside. So it seems like we're approaching all-time highs, and we're going to retest the all-time highs. Again, if everything falls on track in terms of the market gets a confidence that the rate cuts will happen in September, guaranteed basically. Again, from last time a recap, rate cut is expected in September, somewhere between 25 to 50 basis points. And in terms of from September towards the end of the trading year, the market is expecting a total of somewhere between basically 100 basis points rate cut. So 1% interest rate cut overall. And that could lead up to either 0.2, 25 basis points to 50 basis points in September, and then somewhere between 50 to 75 basis points between 1 or 2 extra rate cuts within the year towards the end of the year, right? Now, in terms of the movements, if we were to, I'm going to look over the SPY, which is an ETF for the S&P 500, and then go to the Nasdaq, and then go to the Dow Jones as well. And if we were to go to the upside, it looks like it already tested pretty much close to the higher limit that I was mentioning, that I was expecting by end of trading day Wednesday, not necessarily end of trading day Tuesday to hit, because I was expecting the markets to more wait for the CPI versus the PPI, but they got pretty excited. Oh, mind you, also, NVIDIA earnings is coming up near the end of August. So NVIDIA is moving favorably, moved up 6.53%. After hours is moving up as well, a little bit roughly. I believe it's 0.5% after hours. And then Tesla's been moving up. These are mega cap stocks, but they are moving up substantially. Tesla moved up 5.24%. Now, Tesla doesn't have earnings coming up. It already had earnings come up earlier. But NVIDIA is a big heavy hitter. more so than Tesla. And again, earnings is coming up and they're expected to beat earnings. So given that, they might be moving up the market to the upside. Plus, if we have good catalysts based off, for example, data points that are coming out, for example, CPI tomorrow and all that stuff, then the markets could be heading up higher even more. And like I stated, going up to the all-time highs and testing the all-time highs and potentially having a breakout, potentially. But again, that's day-by-day assessment. We'll see how it goes. But for the time being, we're approaching the resistance level that I was mentioning for potentially the end of the day trading day Wednesday, which is about $543.12. This is again for SPY, which is an ETF for the S&P 500. So essentially same thing, just different ratio. And mind you, closed at $542.04. We didn't hit the 543 and some change, but got close to it. And then the next level I would be anticipating to be approaching, mind you, there will be resistance at the $546 and some change based off this horizontal resistance. And then the next level we'll be looking at is 548 and some change. But essentially, I think what would be happening is going to $550 and some change at some point. Could that be tomorrow's trading day? Potentially, but I think that would be more of the case for Thursday, because Thursday is more jam-packed. Again, if the momentum is to the upside, continually based off the data points that are coming up. Now, if we head to the downside, we could be expecting some decent support actually, because we have two moving averages at the 543 and some change. Plus, horizontally, there was some resistance that could act as support along the lines and then come back down to this level, potentially about 531 and some change. And then in my opinion, the lowest would be about 529 and some change based off the moving average. Plus, there was some consolidation horizontally right about here, which bounced off or had resistance as well. But essentially, mainly off this moving average about 528, 529 and some change. Could we come back down to this level? Yeah, we could, about 518 and some change, but I don't expect it because again, Nvidia earnings coming up and plus the data points seem to be positive, even though the core numbers are not necessarily specifically positive, but the market's taking in a positive light again because the market is expecting regardless a rate cut in September pretty much for the most part, right? Now, if we're looking at QQQ, which is an ETF for Nasdaq, same thing in terms of movement based off of MAC lines and so on and so forth. Data points, earnings from Nvidia, mega cap stock carrying the market, so on and so forth. Data points are favorable for the market in terms of expectations for rate cuts in September, so on and so forth. And what's happening is we already passed this limit, but we didn't hit the upper limit that I was mentioning for the more so for the end of trading day Wednesday, which is about $465 and some change. Mind you, we closed at $462 and some change. So the next level I would be expecting to go up to is about $475 and some change. The only thing is though, yeah, there will be resistance, for example, at the 467 and some change, but essentially, yeah, 467 and some change could potentially stop us out. So that 465 could actually break out. So most likely 465 will break out. Not necessarily most likely, but it'll cause some issues. Then the next level will cause issues about 467, 468, $468, so on and so forth. But after that, which could be end of trading day Tuesday or Thursday, or maybe the Wednesday if the market goes crazy upside. I'm not expecting Wednesday to be insane just because we already had the PPI inflation numbers. So if the CPI inflation numbers are relatively similar, then the markets will be waiting for a Thursday data points. But essentially 474, 475, most likely 475 will be the next level to be tested in terms of resistance. Again, 475 and some change basically. That would be for the upside. Now, if we come to the downside, we will find support, in my opinion, based off these two moving averages right about here colliding. And there's some horizontal resistance support levels around the same price point, which is about $452 and some change, give or take. And then coming down to this back to support level, which is about $448, $447 and some change, give or take. Plus the moving average is probably going to hit around the same price point, give or take, but essentially 446. So basically anywhere from $446 and some change to $448 and some change. And that would be basically the level we could be hovering around if we were to come down to the downside. Now, can we come down to this lower level where we saw a bunch of times support bounce off and resistance bounce off, which is roughly about $433 and some change? We could, but again, I'm not expecting anything crazy to the downside. Again, this is just my opinion, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. But more predominantly because Nvidia's earnings is expected to be a beat leading up to it, which is the end of the trading month. The Nvidia might be moving up substantially, which is a mega cap stock, moving the markets, plus the data points. The market seems it's favorable for September rate cut, so on and so forth. So I'm not expecting major downsides for the time being. And plus, based off the 1 year charts for the MAC lines, the S&P and Nasdaq and all that stuff, they're all pointing to a recovery to the upside, which again, if the data points are good, plus earnings for NVIDIA leading up to it because they're expecting a beat, we could be going to retest the all-time highs and passing them in the next potentially week or so. But yeah, so now for Dow Jones, which is basically in the midpoint for quite some time for the time being. Mind you, we closed at 39,765 points, and we have this upward trend resistance line dating back since 2021, upward trend support level dating back since April of 2024, just to visually show because we're going to be getting close to it. Right about here, so upward trend resistance line since 2021, so on and so forth. This breaks out to multiple touch points, which I'm going to show you right about here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And there was a couple times of like consolidation resistance, somewhat consolidation support a little bit, resistance a little bit, and so on and so forth. So if we were to move up to the upside, the first resistance level I would expect us to hit would be this moving average, which coincidentally hits the horizontal resistance as well, a couple touch points, which is about 39,850 points, give or take. And then the next level would be looking at about 39,970 points-ish, give or take. And then I would expect this potentially to be somewhat stomping us a little bit, which is about, first of all, 40,000 probably cause some issues in terms of resistance because it's a clean number. But then the next level will be about 40,100 points, give or take. And then ultimately, for the most part, this upward trend resistance line, which is about 40,423 points, give or take. Now, those are more to the upside. I could see us hitting the 40,400 and let's just say 48, depending on when we hit it. That's the problem, right? The longer we take, the higher the high will be. And then even with the support level, the longer we take, the higher the low will be, right? But essentially, give it or take, I believe I mentioned it was 40,423 points. Again, that's if we hit it sometime within the next trading day or two. And I would expect that more to be on a Thursday. Again, because CPI inflation numbers, I'm expecting the market already anticipating some kind of general range based off the PPI numbers, and it wouldn't be really a shock factor unless the inflation numbers come in way better than expected, right? So that shows that inflation is cooling down even more better, in a better light. Now, in terms of the downside, we will have support based off the moving average potentially at the 39,287 points, give or take, ballpark. And then coming down, we will have more additional support levels, like for example, at the 39,900 points or 38,900 points. But essentially, this upward trend support level coming in at 38,640 points, let's just say, give or take. Again, these are rough numbers because, again, the longer we take, the higher the low will be, and so on and so forth. Plus, you could argue my lines are not perfect. So give or take those price points. That's basically it for today's video. If you found it beneficial, consider dropping a like. It does help with the channel, so thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it. And if you guys want to be notified when I upload my next video, consider following and subscribing so be notified when I do upload my next video. Thanks again for watching. I do appreciate it. Take care. God bless and peace.